So my name is Kristin Morris. I am the archivist at the Computer History Museum, and today we are conducting an interview with Spencer Pitts for the VMware Founders Collection. Today is October 9th, 2023, and this interview will become part of the permanent collection at the Computer History Museum. Spencer, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. First, just for the record, can you say your name, your current title, and your home base?
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me, Chris. So Spencer Pitts, Chief Technologist for the Digital Workspace Solutions, and home base would be United Kingdom, but I cover Europe, Middle East, and Africa.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us about your education and career journey leading up to VMware?
Yeah, so I joined in 2007. Before that, I went for a typical UK sort of, go to school, got my GCSEs, then went and did A levels. And before that, actually, we did sort of in the middle, what's called AS levels, which is kind of half an A level. One of those was computing. Then I went to university and I studied civil engineering with computing. But actually, the end of year one, I got pneumonia and I was admitted to hospital. And I came out of that and I didn't go back in the year after. And what I ended up doing was actually working for a bakery. And I redesigned at the time their stock control system. And I never went back to university. So it's a little known fact. I don't put that out there all the time, but yeah, I didn't end up completing my my university career, and I sort of dropped out. Can we say that, or sought other opportunities? I think, but ironically, I went back into the bakery, and I followed a career in computing. And by chance, I ended up having an interview for a help desk role with the lady at the bakeries whose son was an IT director at the time, was GMAC Commercial Credit, became part of Bank of New York, actually. And I ended up getting a role as a support desk engineer. And that's when my computer journey, if you like, kicked off. But it was very much a sliding doors type moment. If you look at sort of 3 or 4 instances that led me up to what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm. What was it that attracted you to computing, to high tech?
It's an interesting one. I always liked it at school. I remember the very first time in computers, there was only 2 or 3 in the school. And then we got, I'm really going back here, I'm going to show my age here, Acorn Electrons.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
And I happened to be, they split us up into different groups, and I happened to be in C group. Now, C group was where all the computer department was. So that's where my form teacher group was put. So every morning when I came into school, we sat in the room that happened to be the room for computers. And we'd muck around with the computers. We'd start, programming in BASIC and changing some of the programs to have a bit of a laugh between us. And I think that was probably one of the first times I really sort of got into computing. But I'd already, I guess, liked tech and gadgets and things growing up anyway. But like I say, just by chance, I happened to be in a group that was in the computer department at school. And it sort of flourished from there, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So you were with Bank of New York eventually. And what kind of work were you doing there that kind of led you to the systems role that you ended up with?
So I did a support desk role. So literally answering the phone to users phoning up saying I have a problem. And back then, the computer systems were still mainframe predominantly. And the support desk covered both mainframe, but there was these things called PCs that were coming out as well. And we also had Unix. We had the Unix team, we had the mainframe team, and we had this burgeoning PC team. But I started off just answering calls. My very first day, I always remember it on the job, was taking a lot of floppy disks, both 5.25 and 3.5, and putting them into the machine and doing a virus scan to make sure that there were no viruses. That was my first job. Not sure if I really wanted to carry on being a computer person at that point after going through 500 different floppy disks, but I'm here today, so I clearly managed it. But yeah, that was my first day. I always remember that.
At what point did you become aware of the virtualization world?
So it's interesting because I did the support desk for a while, and I then got into managing PCs and building PCs. And then because I got quite good at it, at the time, the company that which eventually became Symantec was a German company that said, "You're using the product, Spencer. It would be really good if you came along and actually worked for a vendor." So I made that jump from a customer to a vendor. And when I went to that vendor, we needed to do demos. And one of the demos was to build PCs live in front of a customer. Because at the time, people were very manual about how they built users' PCs and desktops and laptops. It was very, very manual, cables in between, and very laborious. And this bit of software that I was using, you needed to show somebody how to build a PC. Now, I used to carry a PC around and a switch and a laptop, which was a server that you could build. And then somebody said, "Why are you doing all of that? Why don't you just use this bit of software? It's called, you know, GSX." I was like, "What do you mean?" "Oh, it's a virtualization software, and you've got 3 machines here, and you could put that all onto one thing." I thought, "Well, that's really interesting." So I played around with it, and then I started using it in front of customers, and I thought it was, amazing. How and it's funny because I got more questions around how are you doing that on 3 machines into one than the
Right.
software that I was actually showing people how to build PCs. But yeah, I used it for demos and labs and original. That probably would have been around 2001, I would say, roughly.
Mhm.
So yeah, Workstation as was, and GSX.
Mhm. And so I've talked to many folks, Duncan Epping included, who said, when I started using VMware's products as a customer, as an end user, so to speak, I saw the potential of lots of other applications than just my little job that I needed it to do.
Yep.
So I'm wondering if you had a similar experience.
So yes, I did. Ironically, not with the products I was using myself, but I remember going to a customer, and they were very interested in automated server builds. And they came to me and said, "We're using this product called ESX." Now, bearing in mind at the time, I was just using the virtualization bit for demos and laptops. I didn't really know what ESX was very, very new. And I remember this
Mm-hmm.
customer telling me, saying, "Well, what you do is you put this software on, and then you run these virtual servers on top." I was like, "Oh, just like the virtual machines that I'm running on this laptop." "Yeah, just like that, but we put Windows Server or we put Linux servers on there." "Okay, but I want you to manage the bit underneath." "So what's the bit underneath?" "Well, that's ESX." "What is it?" "Well, it's kind of Linuxy, but not." So then I ended up looking at it, and then I played with it, and it was a bit of a light bulb moment for me. It was like, okay, so I'm doing this where we're building this software, and then actually these people are consolidating all these massive server farms into a lot less, shall we say. And that was a bit of a wow, this is quite exciting actually. So I definitely, coming from the end user space, saw the potential. And to that point, I left Symantec, and I had a sales guy I used to work with all the time, and he joined VMware. And he kept on phoning me up for
Mm-hmm.
about 2 years, going, "Come over to VMware. It's lovely. We're doing this amazing stuff." And I was like, "No, no, I'm good where I am. It's fine." And then I had that light bulb moment. And then I phoned him up and I said, "Are there any jobs going at VMware?" And he said, "Oh, of course, yeah, you'd be perfect." So
Of course.
2007, I got to have an interview and I came over, and yeah, all because, like I said, the customer said, "Look at this." I couldn't, understand it too much at the time. Got a bit of a light bulb moment. Was putting somebody off, and eventually I came over, and I guess never looked back. But yeah, bit of a light bulb moment
Mm-hmm.
that was.
So, what was your first role at VMware?
So the first role was an SE in the UK. It was a public sector role. So when I was at Symantec before I left, I used to know quite a lot of the police forces and the healthcare and some of the blue light type customers, and I had quite a good relationship. And the sales guys that I said, or the sales guy that phoned me up, he was actually looking after public sector. So he wanted me to come back because I guess I helped make him a lot of money. I don't know. Can I say that? So he said, "Oh, come over and you can be my SE." So I came over and I was the second,
Mm,
I think it was, we were the very first in the UK to make a public sector team. Everybody was in one big group originally.
mm.
And then because I had specialist knowledge, so I came over and I think I was either the first or second public sector dedicated systems engineer. So yeah, 2007, that's what I did.
Mhm. And how long did you do that for? Do you remember?
Well, I probably did it for
It's
about
a
a year and
it's
a
a few
half.
years ago now.
Well, yeah, it's really
Uh,
going back. I did it for, I think, a year and a half, roughly speaking. But the bit that happened as part of that, though, is so, and I used to tell the customers this story. I'd spent 15 years or so, all things end user computing, building PCs, looking after PCs, support desk. And I got into data center by coming over to VMware. And then around about the same time that I came in, VMware bought this company called Propero. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but again, another bit of a sliding doors moment. There was another guy called Spencer who was a systems consultant, I guess. He was one of our PSO guys, our professional services. And he went to see an insurance company. And the insurance company told him, "We're going to run virtual desktops." And he said, "Why the hell would you want to do that?" Well, because we've got all these
mm,
machines that developers in India use, and we have to keep shipping them out there, and it's really unsecure, and the performance isn't very good to come over. Because back then, the internet wasn't quite what it is now. Connectivity wasn't so prevalent, and it was a real problem. User experience was really bad. So what they said is, we're going to see if we can run virtual machines on ESX, and then we're going to remote control into them. And they sort of built their own VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure. But the challenge they
mm,
had after a
mhm,
while was that people kept on connecting to each other's desktops randomly, and it was all a bit of a mess. So this Spencer person, chances of somebody called Spencer coming in, he decided to write a bit of consultancy code to help customers connect. So if I was John Smith, Joe Bloggs, or Susan Smith, I could connect to the right desktop, and I wouldn't end up getting into everybody else's. So he wrote a bit of code, and we sort of thought that's really interesting. And VMware bought a company called Propero, who was sort of doing something at the time. And that was the very, very, very early, and probably about 3 months into my tenure, that the whole virtual
mm,
desktop piece came about. And of course, at the time, my boss, a guy called Simon Townsend, who was our SE manager, who's still at the company, by the way, he said to me, "Do you know about desktops, don't you, Spencer?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I tried to get rid of them, though, to be fair. I came over to here to get rid of desktops. But you're the only one in the team that really knows how to do this stuff. Why don't you look into virtual desktops?" So I said, "Okay, I'll have a look." And I wasn't convinced, I'll be honest. I was like, this will never catch on. It's a bit niche. It's a little bit, you know, people playing around. It won't be enterprise ready. And there were a lot of challenges. So it was quite interesting in the early days that I thought, no, I'm not going to touch that. But, wind forward the clock 16 plus years. And that's really another sliding doors moment that if we hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have ended up specializing in VMware with all things desktops. But my knowledge doing it from a customer perspective in my early days really helped me understand how to then, you know, look into this role what I'm doing now. So yeah, it was a bit of a 3 months in, suddenly another light bulb moment. And then I ended up getting sucked back into the
mhm.
world of desktops, albeit on a virtual platform this time.
So, what kinds of problems did that VDI solve
Well,
for customers?
another interesting one. I say interesting from my perspective. So sadly, over the pandemic, obviously there was a lot of sadness and a lot of worldwide pain that was happening. But there's a slide I used to use, and if only I could show it now. Maybe I could send it on to everybody. But it was the
Yes, you
original
can.
colours, blue and orange, and it had the original use cases that you could solve with virtual desktops. And one of them said, "In the event of a global pandemic."
Mm,
So, yeah, 2007, we were predicting a global pandemic, and it said, "Enable mass relocation of workforces in the event of an outbreak so they could work remotely securely
mm,
at home." Well, who would have thought, 15
mhm,
years later, as part of the pandemic, virtual desktops were helping lots of people work securely from their own devices at home and keeping a lot of businesses running. So I like to put that slide back up sometimes just to sort of say, I'm not saying that we're Nostradamus or anything, but clearly VDI, had a use case back then. But yeah, that was the main one, was remote secure working.
Mm-hmm. Was that a hard sell to customers? Because 13 years ago, in the early 20 teens, very few companies were thinking about how could we let people work from their own devices.
Yeah, very, very, very true. So I don't think at the time they were thinking more about running from their own device. It was more, as I was saying before, developers, and they didn't trust them, and they didn't want the data residing on the machine they were connecting from. So they may have still been machines, but they didn't want to have any data going across the wire, so to speak. So for that use case, they were quite okay with it. It was a very security-led driven thing. What happened at the same time, though, is desktops become really, really hard to manage again. New operating systems come out, and there was a lot of fatigue around updating to the next Windows version. And people started looking at VDI and thinking, okay, it's secure, but if I don't have to manage the device underneath that people are connecting from, that's a lot better for me as an IT, organization, that I don't have to patch these things. I don't have to distribute apps. I can bring it all in. And then something around about 2009, 2010 came out where we could do cloning at the hypervisor level very cleverly. And there was a bit of tooling called Composer. Effectively, it was a copy on write technology. But the idea was that you could take a master VM and you could clone it very, very quickly, but you wasn't cloning the full disk. You were just doing the extra writes. And that became a really interesting moment for virtual desktops, because suddenly you could image a lot of machines really quickly. And that was like, okay, so if I can do that, then the whole process that I manage machines, keep them patched, updated. IT started seeing VDI as not just a security tool, but it could be a better way for them to keep their desktops managed, patched, and up to date. Because patching has always been a bit of a laborious task at scale, and especially when you have thousands upon thousands of machines and laptops. So VDI became a little bit like an IT tool to solve other problems as well. However, I would argue at the time it wasn't the best user experience. If you wanted to use Notepad and say Word, fantastic. If you wanted to watch videos, that didn't really work. Audio wasn't probably the best. High-end graphics were what I used to call kryptonite for virtual desktops. So there were a lot of things that we learned over the time about. That's great. It's an IT thing. But as the world became, we want to do media-rich type applications and other sort of high-end graphics, those things needed to be fixed. And I'm glad to say we've done that over the 16 plus years I've been here. From where we were back then and all the challenges, we pretty much solved most use cases, if not all. Short of not having a physical network connection, you can pretty much virtualize anything into a VDI session now. And that's testament, I think, to the way that VMware have done that. There's been some great engineering throughout my time here.
You came from Symantec, right, into VMware. Can you describe the difference in culture, company culture, when you arrived at VMware?
So Symantec was quite, how can I put it, mature, shall we say? Or well-rounded, let's put it that way. Lots of systems and processes and lots of competition as well. And I always remember on my first day, when I came in, I sort of got bombarded with a lot of information, but it was the culture you could tell straight away. And don't forget, at that time, we were riding a bit of a crest of a wave. It was a brand new technology in a space that there was no competition. And I'd been used to getting really, really used to competition. And Hyper-V and Microsoft were just entering the space at the time. And I always remember on my first day going, I better need to make sure that I understand all the competitive stuff. So, from going out with customers, having them, I thought they were going to say, look, we want to use this stuff, but here's all the reasons why we can't. Instead, it was, by the way, we're going to buy this anyway. We just want to know how it works. It's so cool. So, and I got all very ready to give them a competitive why you should go with VMware and learning everything. And it was just amazing. Right. So the culture of how customers adored the technology. It was a bit of I would say a religion almost, if we're allowed to say that now. But yeah, so many devoted people that just absolutely adored. And that transmitted into the culture internally as well. So you've got customers that love you, and then you've got a very sort of quick, I would almost call it that it's a startup, but at the same time, not a startup, but all the process, because we went so quickly, all the processes and all the things underneath were let's just everybody muck in and make it happen. And we grew so quickly. But the culture internally was fantastic. I got to go out to Palo Alto. I think it was after 2 weeks to do my new hire training, and just remember just being inside the Palo Alto campus and being in awe of all the people. Got to see Scott Herod for the very first time, and listen to him. And yeah, that's an amazing. You get some CTOs, and we've had some great CTOs over our time, but for me, he's one of those. He can go really, really deep, and I just remember listening to his technical prowess, but also do the evangelistic thing as well. And there's not many people I've seen in the industry that can go that low and that high as well. So I always remember him having a big effect. And that just from a technical perspective, you just felt you was in the place to be. You didn't think you should be anywhere else in the world. Interestingly, I didn't know that until I came across. Like I said, I'd been telling my sales guy, no, I'm comfortable where I am. And then it took about a couple of weeks, and I realized, why would I want to be anywhere else? It was just, it was amazing. So life-changing, one might say.
Can you describe that relationship between sort of the global teams and the headquarter teams? Like, how did you become part of VMware over that distance, if you will?
Yeah, it's the UK was a reasonable size, probably about 50, 60 people when I first joined, and rapidly grew. So there was this sense of, you had your own local piece, but a lot of our product managers, if not all of them, were in the US. So you needed to make sure that you were on regular calls, and you didn't care so much in terms of, I was a lot younger, probably didn't have the family commitments as well. I'd be on a lot of regular calls, but I was in sponge mode in that first, I would say 6 months. I just wanted to learn everything. I went out and bought lots of machines and practiced. And if I had a problem, I'd ping lots of the people in the US that I met when I first went to the start training and said, I'm trying this. Have you tried this? And it was just a big sense of community. There was always somebody willing to help. And the product managers were very open then. I think probably because we were small. I'm not saying they're not now, by the way, but we're massive now, so there's a lot more processes in the way. But just that sense of everybody was willing to help. So if you had a problem, you either picked up the phone, you pinged somebody, and you'd pretty much get an answer straight away wherever they were in the world. You probably had to wait, to ping them if you were very, very early in the morning. But I'm sure a lot of them didn't sleep. Well, that's what it felt like back then.
So end user computing really became your area of expertise.
Yep.
How did that mesh in with the company's sort of larger strategy and development?
Yeah, it's interesting
because that was new for VMware, right? I mean,
that was. Yeah. And it was probably the first, I would say, specialist area that VMware got into, because you had everything that was data center, and it was, iterations on the product. I went through the vMotion hallelujah moment, which was amazing, right? But then, this was we've pretty much not owned the market, but we're on how can we digress? And that's where this virtual desktop piece came. So that was a company that was a UK-based company. So back to that point just a moment ago, a lot of the PMs then were in the UK. So I don't know whether that was just another thing that I happened to be in the right place at the right time. But I ended up developing a good relationship with a lot of engineers and PMs, and I could reach out directly to engineering in those days. But I guess for us, it was a little bit to the side of the main VMware strategy, if we're being honest. It did feel the main link was the fact that you had some desktop teams that ran their stuff on virtual infrastructure. And that was probably where the main link was. There was no other real link. It wasn't like we said, we want to go and do X, Y, and Z. It just happened to be that, again, lots of customers wanted to run virtual desktops. what happened at about the same time as well was that we ended up becoming very much in competition with Citrix. Citrix had a product that was running on, server-based computing for a while, been around for a while. VMware had come out with this VDI solution, which sort of said it was better, or one might argue we said that back in the day. And Citrix didn't really do VDI, so you had this almost. This is the way it's always been in terms of VDI-esque, and it's not true VDI depending on which way you looked at it. And VMware had come out with this virtual desktop solution, so there was a bit of that going on as well. And it was about the first time that I think VMware ever had competition. So it was a different sell for VMware, and it really showed the need that, yeah, we got some great people and great technical people, but if you're a data center person, you probably can't have a conversation with an end user computing, help desk or a workspace architect. So that's why my knowledge and what I'd done before became particularly interesting, because I knew the virtual piece, but I could have a conversation with end user computing teams, which was a different persona buying for VMware. So it kind of was a bit different for us back then, I would say. But, VMware now, if you look at end user computing, is over $1 billion. So it's almost a business in its own right. So it was the original, if you want, specialist team, though.
Always, when companies make these kinds of shifts or add these kinds of like you said, the things that are a bit to the side, like it's not an unnatural direction to go, but it is a little to the side. Was there pushback? Did you feel pushback from parts of the company saying, that's not what we do? Maybe we shouldn't be going that direction.
I don't think I ever saw any pushback. I just saw more of a, we don't know this area. We need help. And we think we have a large opportunity. So if there was any pushback, it was probably, surreptitiously, because the people just maybe weren't in that area. But I just saw it as an opportunity. Here I am in this virtualization company, and I seem to have a lot of knowledge in an area that nobody else in the team does. That puts me at probably a bit of an advantage in one sense, and I've almost got a bit of a blank check that I can start to do things with. So I saw it as a real good opportunity to say, right, okay, everyone's coming to me with questions. And after a while, it became a little bit unbearable, not in it's not very nice, but in an unmanageable sense. So I thought to myself, okay, how am I going to make this work? The ways I could do this is by getting some like-minded folk. So there were some people in the teams that didn't really know it, but they were very interested. And I sort of created this SME group, which is sort of where I've got to now. And I run this call as it is today. We're on a Monday, I think it is. And I run a call now that's been going probably 16 years plus. I called it the team call. It's called the Technical EMEA EUC Monday call, the team call. And I love an acronym, so you've got to get that in there as well. But that's been running for years. And originally, when it first came out, it was just for 4 or 5 people that didn't really know too much. But I could get onto a call, tell them what was going on, answer some questions, give them some information, and just some, community sharing. So that became actually an opportunity. So even though it wasn't really pushback, it was just people didn't know and they wanted to come to me, but I needed a way of getting the knowledge out there, so to speak. So I created this team. Unbeknownst to me, there was another guy called Tommy Walker in the US who was also doing something there. And then eventually 3 or 4 people worldwide were the main technical, if you want, deep dive experts in end user computing. And we ended up becoming our own little global SME group. So we sort of joined forces, and then some of them, probably about 50% of those people that were in that original group are still here today. Another guy called Todd Dayton as well, that was part of the early times. But yeah, it was very much, we know a little bit about end user computing. A lot of our core teams don't, and we're here to help them. And the more we can get our rest of the team out there talking about it, the easier it is for us and the more opportunity there is. So yeah, it was good. It was fun. Busy, but fun.
Busy. It's always busy when you're the person who knows the most about something, right?
Well,
I would just call Spencer. He'll answer your question.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, I wouldn't want that to come across as, well, yes, I'm the one that knows everything.
No.
But I just thought that was a great opportunity to help others and, spread the love, so to speak. So, but yeah, I was definitely
Yes.
busy at that time.
Well, and it's in development, right? At that point, right? That the team is in development. You will get more people. You will grow the business, and it expands and everything
Mm.
from that kernel, from that start. Yeah. Um, are there particular projects or products that you've worked on of which you are particularly proud?
Yeah, so that team call I'm talking about, I wouldn't really call it a project because it's been ongoing for ages. But doing that and seeing the team grow from 4 people, and then sometimes I look at the core and I had at its height, probably in the pandemic, about 130 people every Monday. That's particularly
Mm-hmm.
satisfying, and seeing everybody interacting. I've done some work for, probably can't say who they are, customers, very secret. And I actually have a family member who works for one of those teams, and luckily every now and again we get to go and visit her. And I saw some of the stuff I'd done be implemented where she works, and I didn't realize this. So we were being shown around where she worked, and they went, "Oh, that's how I connect." And hold on, that says VMware Horizon. Yeah, that's how we connect to get email. Oh, I didn't know that. She said, "Oh, why?" I said, "Well, I sort of designed that, and I never knew where it went to." So some things like that, where
Wow.
your personal life collides with some of your business life, and you see, because computing can be a little bit, especially in our role, it's not tangible in the same way. If you're like a carpenter or somebody who makes something, you see the end product. Sometimes you don't get to see that as a somebody in computing, but to then see it in action being used, and it's a member of your family who sees it as a core piece of technology that they do for their job, that becomes really rewarding as well. And also, my son was with me and my daughter, so I turn around and go, "Oh, Daddy helped do that," and so it's kind of a nice thing there when we got to go around. So yeah, I'd probably say that's one of the proudest from a personal. But I've done some other projects where
Mm-hmm.
I've done multiple VM worlds and explores and run some large bids that come to fruition. So there's some nice sort of corporate stories, but from a personal side, seeing some stuff you get involved with come all the way to the end, and you're not knowing about it, and then it's suddenly coming up in front of all your family. I think it has to be the best.
Mm-hmm. Um, I think it must all it like you said, when you're also working on these teams and thinking about, oh well, it could do this. Someone could use it to do X, or someone could, let's build this functionality in that might help someone do this kind of a job with it. But you don't really know if that's how customers use it and if that's how end users experience it. Um, you
Yeah.
mentioned that in the beginning of virtual desktop, like the end user experience wasn't that great. So how did VMware go about improving that part?
So that probably happened, I guess. You do a proof of concept, you'd go to a customer, and back then a lot of customers didn't know what they wanted to do with desktops. I think there was a blind assumption you could take your whole physical estate of PCs and laptops and put them into virtual. What happened very quickly is they'd roll them out to some pilot users or groups of people to test, and they'd realize there's some issues. But the benefits of what they were trying to do outweighed those. So what you'd ended up getting is a group of, probably, and there's always the 80-20 rule in computing, 80% of the users were fine. There were some issues, and 20% you couldn't use. So you tended to keep them still as physical. So you got a bit of a, these are the ones fit for virtual, and you had these 20% that couldn't. And I think what then happened is we sort of sat back internally and said, well, why can't you do those 20? What can we do to change that? And I think we've been on a mission to go, okay, well, the first one is we can't run 3D graphics. So what can we do around that? So we did a lot of work with NVIDIA in the early days. The protocol, how you connect to your actual virtual desktop. Is that a good experience? It's, if you've not got enough bandwidth, we did some early work with remote desktop protocol, the Microsoft out the box protocol, and it was okay, But again, it didn't do things like, voice, didn't really do multimedia. If you're trying to watch videos, well, you probably get one frame every 2 seconds. So it probably didn't really work as a visual medium. So yeah, we just sort of worked with customers, iterated on the product. So that was from the user side. And similarly at the back end, if you're cloning thousands and thousands of desktops without some of those, inventions like Composer, and then eventually what we know as instant clones. So instant clones was a bit of a game changer for virtual desktops, being able to spin up desktops in milliseconds, customize on the fly, ready to go. So you can, expand your desktops and shut them down. That was a real big moment, I think, for virtual desktops as well. But most of it was just literally working with customers, understanding what didn't work, understanding why, feeding with direct sort of integration with the PMs to understand if we did this, we did that, would that change it? And then over those years, finally getting to the point where, like I say, there probably isn't many things that we can't do with EDI and the solution, short of not having a network connection. So I'm quite proud that we got to that mythical 100%. I'm not saying customers do that. I think there's always reasons why that may not be technological. They might just be a customer doesn't want to do that for whatever reason. Their manager has a preference for a physical rather than or something along those lines, right? But pretty much most things can be, achieved with it. So it's quite important just working with customers and iterating again and again. I think it's just, testament to the teams there that have done that.
Mm-hmm. Are there any people you would like to call out for having a significant impact on your career at VMware?
Yeah, I've mentioned a couple, but I'll really say some. So Scott Herod from, I guess not really having a CTO in the same way. I mean, we had some clever people at Symantec, but I remember seeing him and thinking, wow, that's, if I ever want to be, half as good, that's the kind of a CTO type person I look up to. I remember that. My boss at the time, Simon Townsend. So even though I painted this picture of everything being brilliant, I did actually go through a couple of personal lows in my life. My dad died sort of early on in the when I joined VMware, so a lot of stuff in the family side, and I did have a low moment, and he helped me come out the other end and sort of push me when I thought that I couldn't maybe take the next step. So, my manager at the time, Simon, a person who's left VMware now, a guy called Rory Clements, that in the early days that I worked quite closely with, who worked all the way up and was working closely with Sanjay before Sanjay left the group as well. And another guy called Matt Coppinger, who actually came and joined pretty much, I would say, about a week before I did, as part of that company we bought called Propero. And Matt and I still work a lot today, and we share a lot of the old times around how things were. So it's always quite nice to have somebody that's been there and done it with you. There's been a lot of other people as well, I would say, but and when I look at some of the tech sort of role models I've looked at, they would be the ones as well.
Last question on my list, which we ask everyone, is what do you think is the lasting impact of VMware's technology?
A couple of things I would say. I think from what we've helped the world do, well, I remember in the early days, the green impact that we did, taking all of those servers down and minimizing. And I remember the early days, we talked a lot about carbon footprint and how we could do a lot of work there. And I think we're still continuing to do it. So I think there'll be an impact from a green perspective. But I also think about how we change the complete way of doing things in IT. Every now and again, you get these moments where something really, completely revolutionary comes out. And I think VMware will be remembered for one of those technologies that came around and completely changed the industry and shook everybody up and, made people fall back in love, shall I say, with IT. I think definitely, like I mentioned earlier, people being so sort of passionate about the products. I think VMware made it cool again to do that. So I think it will be remembered for that. But I also think it will be remembered, I think, for some fantastic technology in all areas. But also, I think for the great work that they do. I've personally been able to donate a lot of money to charitable causes, and mostly because of the great work the VMware does, not just for the tech, but giving back to the community as well. And I think they'll be known for that.
That's all I have on my list. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Only that when I look at myself today, I mean, I'm a lot older and I've still got my original photo on my door card. I think I got the original one that I had when I first walked through those doors in, at the time, that was Frimley in the UK. From where I was then to where I am now, I've got a lot to be thankful for. I hope to think that I did some of that myself as well. But if it wasn't for VMware, I wouldn't be where I am today and have the great family I have and the opportunity to do what I do. So I guess it's just a big thank you to VMware as it is. Made me what I am today, I think.